Decoded.
Welcome, curious minds, to Book Decoded.
Great to be here.
Forget those dry summaries you might find elsewhere. We're here to dive deep, really deep into the ideas, the stories, the sheer knowledge packed into some amazing books.
And today, we're tackling a big one.
We really are. We're heading on an adventure inspired by Aldo Cazzullo's The Neverending Empire. It's this journey that honestly reveals just how much ancient Rome still shapes, well, pretty much everything around us.
It's quite staggering when you start looking.
Totally. Get ready for some surprising links, maybe some insights you haven't thought of, and hopefully a few aha moments along the way. Let's turn the page and decode this empire.
So right off the bat, Cazzullo makes this really bold claim. He says the Anglo-Saxon empires, the British and especially the American one, are direct heirs of Rome.
It's a strong opening statement, isn't it? And he immediately backs it up with symbolism.
Exactly. That American eagle, for instance.
Hard to miss that one. It's so clearly linked to the Roman legions, their standards.
And then the U.S. motto, E pluribus unum, out of many one.
Which just screams Roman principles, doesn't it? How they brought so many different peoples together.
It goes beyond symbols, too. Think about place names. The Capitol building in D.C.
A direct echo of the Roman Capitolium, obvious once you see it.
And the architecture. The Jefferson Memorial is practically the Pantheon revisited.
Right. And the White House, all those neoclassical buildings in Washington, it feels intentional.
Oh, definitely. Choosing the eagle wasn't just about picking a strong bird. It was about invoking Rome, its power, its authority, linking the new republic to Rome's perceived strength, maybe suggesting a similar destiny.
It does feel like they were consciously trying to drape themselves in that Roman mantle. And Cazzullo says it's not just superficial, right? There are strategic parallels, too.
Yes, in how both empires expanded, how they held on to power. He even makes this quite provocative suggestion that the U.S. story, like China's, might actually be seen as 3,000 years old because of this continuous Roman thread.
Wow. That really reframes things. It suggests the West isn't some modern idea, but a structure built on these really ancient Roman foundations.
Precisely. And the influence isn't just in politics or buildings. It's embedded in our language.
Oh, absolutely. Cazzullo points this out so well. Think about religion words like faith, religion, pontiff. They're Latin.
And military terms, too. Arms, army, general, soldier.
Even everyday societal words. Conquered, family, matrimony, all Latin roots.
The depth is what's striking. And it's not just concepts. So many cities across the globe have names with Roman origins.
Either founded by Rome or named later by colonizers wanting that association, that prestige.
It's like Rome left these linguistic breadcrumbs everywhere.
And it goes into practical stuff too, right? Laws, roads.
Oh yeah, roads definitely. And the calendar, the very structure of our year.
The days of the week, mostly Latin-derived. The months, January, February, March. Many named after Roman gods or figures like Julius Caesar or Augustus.
It's constant, quiet reminder. Then there's Roman military strategy, divide and rule.
Integrating foreigners, respecting local ways, but imposing Roman justice.
These were incredibly effective methods, studied and copied for centuries.
It really does sound like a sort of imperial playbook. But it wasn't just brute force, was it? Cazzullo emphasizes the moral side, too.
Very much so. These stories of civic virtue, of self-sacrifice for Rome, people like Cloelia or Attilius Regulus.
Even if they're partly legend, the fact they were told, repeated, valued.
That says a lot about Roman ideals, doesn't it? This idea of keeping your word, even if it costs you everything.
That's absolutely key. These narratives, whether literally true or not, shaped Roman morality. They promoted courage, loyalty, duty above self. Their impact was huge.
And Rome left its mark on the arts, too. Learning from the Greeks in poetry, but finding its own voice.
Spreading influence through culture as well as conquest.
So Cazzullo's point seems to be, to really get why Rome still matters, you have to go back to the very beginning, to the foundational myths.
Which brings us straight to Virgil and the Aeneid.
Right. And it's interesting who Virgil doesn't choose as the founder. Not Ulysses. No, not the cunning, tricky Ulysses. He chooses Aeneas, embodiment of duty, of piety, of valor. The Romans wanted a founder known for strength and commitment, not necessarily cleverness or deceit.
A very deliberate choice. Valor over guile. And Cazzullo notes Virgil's real aim wasn't just glorifying war, but celebrating Augustus for bringing peace after all that civil strife.
Exactly, which connects perfectly to Aeneas as a character. He's not like Mark Antony, driven by passion.
No, Aeneas consistently puts his mission, founding Rome, above his own happiness. The Dido story is the ultimate example of that.
Such a powerful part of the epic. And Virgil treats Dido with real sympathy, doesn't he? Even though Aeneas leaves her.
He does. It's like she gets her own kind of peace in the afterlife, while Aeneas just keeps suffering for Rome's future.
The message seems clear. Rome's destiny is bigger than any one person. Aeneas is always fleeing, always facing hardship, never finding real peace until Italy.
In Italy, Laudium is framed as the destined homeland, a return almost to ancestral roots for the Trojans, not just conquest, but a kind of homecoming.
And the imagery Virgil uses is so potent, that shield of Aeneas.
Oh yeah, showing Cato dispensing justice in Elysium and Catiline being punished in Tartarus, reinforcing those core Roman values.
And who's right at the center of that shield? Augustus, victor of Actium.
Portrayed not as winning a civil war, but defeating foreigners. Clever political framing.
Very clever. And even the main enemy, Turnus, isn't just a villain. He's presented as a worthy adversary, embodying Latin virtues, a kind of new Achilles.
Cazzullo mentions that powerful line from Juno, "If I cannot sway the gods above, I will stir the realms below."
Flectere sine quo superos aceranta movebo. Amazing that Freud used it as the epigraph for the interpretation of dreams.
It shows how deep these lines go in our culture. And fortune favors the bold. Audentes fortuna juvat, that's from the Aeneid too, spoken about Turnus.
It just highlights the Aeneid's incredible staying power. Cazzullo talks about Virgil's posthumous reputation too, how his verses were seen as almost prophetic.
People using them like divination, the Virgilian fates influencing emperors like Hadrian, even Charles II.
It's wild to think about. An eternal source of inspiration, maybe self-discovery.
And Cazzullo brings it right up to date, suggesting Aeneas could be seen as a kind of proto-refugee, always looking for a home after war. Gives it a modern resonance.
It really does. Okay, so shifting gears slightly to the myth of the Republic. Cazzullo points out something funny, how hard it is to actually name the 7 kings of Rome.
Yeah, it's true. Which leads back to that question, who really founded Rome? Aeneas or Romulus?
It's a bit tangled, isn't it? And it wasn't just poets like Virgil shaping the story. Historians like Livy were crucial in weaving these traditions together, connecting Aeneas to Romulus.
So Aeneas becomes the grandfather, the deep ancestor, and Romulus the father, the more immediate founder.
But the Romulus story itself, it's not exactly clean-cut heroism, is it?
Not at all. Fratricide, the Sabine women incident. It's pretty brutal. Violent beginnings.
Cazzullo suggests the Romans kind of accepted this, though. Maybe saw it as a realistic, even necessary start for a powerful state, an acceptance of a complex, maybe dark origin.
But there were other elements too, right? Hospitality, integrating different groups. Roman society did allow for some mobility, freed slaves, common soldiers rising up.
True. And Romulus's death is mysterious, maybe even ending in deification. But what's clear is the reaction afterwards. A strong aversion to kings.
Which led to the Senate and this complicated way of choosing leaders. Not kings, but figures like Numa Pompilius.
Showing the transition towards a republic. And Cazzullo highlights Servius Tullius' census, organizing the army and society into these centurias based on wealth.
Those divisions based on wealth, forming the centuriate assembly, that sounds like a massive step, linking power and money.
A fundamental basis for the Roman state for centuries. But Cazzullo notes this shift wasn't peaceful. Violence was often the midwife of history for Rome.
Servius Tullius getting assassinated, the whole Lucrece story sparking the redemption.
Exactly. Very dramatic, violent catalysts. Which brings us to the heroes of the early republic. Not just conquerors, but symbols of resistance, sacrifice. Horatius at the bridge.
Cloelia escaping, then returning because Rome had given its word.
Gaius Musius Scaevola putting his hand in the fire. These stories hammered home the importance of duty, courage, keeping promises.
Even when the outcome was tragic, like with Regulus, that painting Cazzullo mentions, focusing on his suffering for duty.
Powerful stuff. And Coriolanus' exile, loyalty tested, the pull of home.
Marcus Curtius leaping into the chasm, sacrificing Rome's greatest asset, courage itself, for the city.
These myths define what it meant to be Roman. The early republic certainly had its struggles, defeats against Samnites, Greeks, but showed incredible resilience.
Fabius Maximus, the delayer, his tactics even influencing the Fabian society much later.
But there was always that tension. Cato the censor warning about Greek influence corrupting Roman values.
That struggle to maintain identity while expanding and absorbing others. And Cazzullo argues the Republic's own success, becoming so vast, eventually strained its structures to the breaking point.
Which leads us into the darker side, the crises. Slaves, for example. Cazzullo calls them the real black hole of the Roman world.
It's just considered property. Even someone like Seneca, relatively progressive, had very limited views on their treatment.
The idea of universal human equality was just incredibly slow to develop. Slaves had virtually no legal standing.
That horrific story of all 400 slaves of Lucius Pedanius Secundus being executed because one might have killed him.
And unwanted infants often just became slaves. Manumission, freedom was possible, but rare. Most remained nameless.
And then you get Spartacus.
Spartacus, leading this massive slave revolt, actually defeating Roman legions multiple times.
Gauls, Germans joining him. But Cazzullo notes his cruelty too, making prisoners fight as gladiators.
Yeah, it wasn't a simple story of liberation. And that fateful decision after winning at Mutina to turn back towards Rome instead of seeking freedom across the Alps.
A strategic error.
Yeah.
Or something else. And then Crassus takes command against him, uses decimation, killing 1 in 10 of his own soldiers to restore discipline.
Brutal. Spartacus is eventually defeated, killed, though his name, interestingly, gets resurrected centuries later by the Soviet Union with the Spartakiad Games.
Before Spartacus, though, there were others trying to address the Republic's problems. The Gracchi brothers.
Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, trying social reform, land redistribution.
Tiberius focusing on agrarian reform, trying to help the small farmers, murdered by the elite, the optimates.
Then his brother Gaius pushes for broader changes, land, rights for provincials. He meets a similar fate.
But they became symbols, didn't they, of social justice, redemption, inspiring later figures.
Cazzullo mentions how they represented the decline of that old republic ideal. The peasant soldier, the small landowner, large estates, the latifundia, were taking over.
Rome was clearly facing a moral crisis, leading towards the civil wars. Which brings us to Catiline.
Lucius Sergius Catilina, the conspiracy, and Cicero's famous speeches against him.
When, O Catiline, do you mean to cease abusing our patients? Still quoted today.
Catiline flees, his co-conspirators are arrested, and there's a debate about executing them. Julius Caesar argues against the death penalty.
But Cicero goes ahead, executes them without a full trial, gets him exiled later, shows the political turmoil.
And Caesar himself. Cazzullo reminds us of his early defiance against Sulla. Nearly executed then. Always seemed composed under pressure.
Then his campaigns in Gaul, immense victories, but also brutality, the massacres at Avaricum.
And the tough siege of Gergovia, where Vercingetorix actually handed Caesar a defeat.
But Caesar prevails. Pompey flees, Caesar pursues him, shows clemency sometimes, like to Domitius at Corfinium.
Claims he wants to restore the Republic, but simultaneously seizes the treasury, asserts his dominance, grants citizenship to Cisalpine Gaul.
Crosses the Adriatic, visits Troy, prays to Venus, his supposed ancestor. He's building his own legend.
His 4 triumphs in Rome are spectacular, but Cazzullo notes the mixed reactions, like showing Cato's effigy.
He makes populist moves, handing out money, staging games, but also less popular ones like cutting the free grain ration, expelling unemployed foreigners.
He was a reformer too, though, banning luxury imports, promoting families, tackling traffic, even promoting the use of bound papyrus books, codices over scrolls.
Wins again in Spain. Reportedly shows no emotion when presented with Pompey's head.
But there's this growing feeling, Cazzullo suggests, that Caesar's overturning of institutions was too much, too fast.
Cicero's letters about Caesar visiting him give this uneasy glimpse into the power dynamics.
And the honors just pile up. Statues, a temple, dictator for life, imperator.
His ambition seems boundless, modeled on Alexander the Great. Plans for more campaigns, massive building projects.
Which all feeds into the conspiracy against him, led by Brutus and Cassius.
The omens beforehand, Calpurnia's dream, classic dramatic foreshadowing.
Then the assassination itself, March 15th, 44 BC, in the Curia of Pompeii.
Stabbed multiple times. His supposed last words, et tu Brute, you too, Brutus, though that might be more Shakespeare than history.
His body lies at the foot of his rival Pompey's statue. Brutus tries to address the senators, but it's chaos.
Mark Antony's funeral speech turns the tide of public opinion. The crowd goes wild. Cazzullo mentions the grief of Jews and Caesar's former legionaries.
Caesar's body is cremated in the Forum, a column erected. But the city descends into chaos. They even kill the wrong Cinna by mistake.
Cicero's own son joins Brutus. It becomes clear very quickly.
Caesar's death solved nothing. It just unleashed more conflict.
And into that vacuum steps Caesar's young heir, Octavian, ready to claim his inheritance.
A whole new chapter begins.
And there we have to leave it for today, a glimpse, really, into this vast, never-ending empire Cazzullo explores. From the architecture we see daily to the words we use, from ancient heroism to the brutal realities of power, Rome's echoes are just undeniable.
We hope this decoding of the never-ending empire has sparked some thoughts, maybe offered some new angles. What parts of Rome's legacy really stand out to you? What other connections might be hiding just beneath the surface of our modern world?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? This book goes so much further, of course. Augustus, Christianity, the fall of the West, Rome and art, later empires. It's all in there.
Perhaps this is just the start of your own exploration.
Could be. Until our next decoded book, keep those curious minds turning.